Thanks for joining us. My name is Matt Peterson, NAGDA's Executive Director. Welcome to another Connect conversation. Good to have you here. Today, we're going to be talking about something a little different. So we're going to talk about plan health. And to do that today with me is Nick Amaral. He is the Vice President of Data Analytics and Insights at Fidelity. Welcome, Nick. Good to see you again.
Great. Hi, Matt.
So when we talk a lot about benchmarking.
Yep.
At NAGDA, and we have our Pearl partnership where we get a lot of data. We have a lot of information, but it's kind of your standard information about balances, contributions, investments, those kind of things. Obviously, those metrics are important. Our members also know there's a lot more to building a successful plan, and I think those are the things that would be great to talk about today. We talk a lot about your standard benchmarking, but can you talk about some metrics that may not be like your typical metrics that you would use in plan by plan, side by side benchmarking that plan sponsors can think about when they're trying to determine, am I doing a good job, right? Am I running a successful plan?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. We find that most plans are hitting respectable participant targets, and generally participants are doing quite well. But Fidelity's retirement savings assessment shows that just about half, 48% of U.S. households are in the green according to income replacement targets, and roughly around 34% are in this sort of red zone or needs attention. So I think with our plans that we work with together, there's significant amount of participants that are doing quite well. It's just there's always a group that we tend to target for improvements around things like plan design, and we take a holistic view. So I think one of the things we have at Fidelity is our retirement plan health score, and I think that really does help us link levers to plan design with outcomes, things like plan benchmarks, participant savings rates, and income replacement ultimately.
Yeah, and I think in public plans specifically, when you have a lot of our folks have either a DB component or they're a primary DB with a supplemental DC, it's a lot to think about. Like your standard metrics might not always be the ones that are the ones that you can look at and say, okay, I'm successful. I think in the 401k world, there's a lot of uniformity. Obviously, ERISA pushes you towards that, but our world is much more bespoke. It's much more diverse in the different types of plans, and maybe what you would look at in ways to measure, am I doing a good job? So how does, if you kind of try to zoom out and think about things beyond just balances or investment structures, how does that change the way that public plan sponsors can think about benchmarking when they're looking at their plan and trying to improve it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I think one of the things that we will work with plans like this on is if there's a DB in place, and with the pure DC world, we'll talk a lot about 15% total savings rate. Well, if there's a defined benefit in place, 15% is not the rule of thumb anymore, but what is it, right? So based on your defined benefit plan, what might be that target DC savings rate? Like what, for your organization, what might be that rule of thumb? Is it 5%? Is it 2 or 3%? What's going to get folks to really close that gap to retirement when looking at Social Security DB plus this DC component? And, it gets fairly complicated with defined benefit tiers, and, as things have evolved for each organization, that rule of thumb could be different for the employees based on when they were hired.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think there are kind of some standard levers that is often talked about on the 401k side, which are, just implement auto enrollment, do auto escalate. Some of those are limited with our folks too. And so it does really take a different kind of thinking if you're really trying to help them move the needle within the context of what their plan can do. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those levers are that you all have focused on, knowing kind of the limits of the public plan space?
Yeah, absolutely. We understand, right? There's some several bullets for some plans, right? Auto enroll is certainly really successful, but limited in terms of what we're allowed to do in public sector space. So I think it, auto increase can be an option for
Yeah,
plans.
that's
So
true.
that's one major thing. But what after that, you're really left with understanding where folks are and doing a good job of communicating to those folks that you think need help, and using the tools that you have in place to understand where folks are in terms of their savings rate and combined with what they get from their pension and what might they need to save, and education, communication. That's the really focus for these kinds of um, and it's challenging, right? Like when I
Yeah.
think where auto enroll is sort of this again silver bullet. Um, the communication efforts. It's sort of a never ending sort of blocking and tackling.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that is often difficult, especially if you don't have a lot of comparables for our plans, a lot of them do have pretty unique structures. So it's hard to look across the spectrum and say, okay, I'm gonna, create this peer group of 40 plans, and then I'm gonna measure my um benchmark myself against them. So how do you measure all this stuff? What are some wellness diagnostics and engagement analytics that plans can think about when they're really trying to pinpoint, like, okay, these are the things that I'm trying to work on. I can measure them, and then set some goals around those things to try to get to a better state next year, next quarter, or whatever the timeline is.
Yeah, definitely. I think our approach here now at Fidelity is to focus on financial wellness and engagement. The way we do measure that is, are your employees engaged in the retirement benefits? So are they logging into the website? How deep are they going within the website? Are they just checking their balances, or are they using the educational content, or are they using some of the planning tools to understand, how they're doing? And grouping employees based on those tiers, that helps us understand, where folks are in their education and planning, um, activity. Another component of that is how many folks are really not logging in at all. So we have a term for that, the unengaged and deeply unengaged. That component of it really highlights those individuals. And I think what helps there is within your own plan, looking at the profiles of those people that are, for instance, sort of highly engaged versus deeply unengaged. And with that understanding, being able to, again, develop those sort of targeted communications to those individuals that are maybe not monitoring their account as good as they should, and getting those nudges along the way to, really one is getting that confidence in their what they have in place, awareness of the benefit that you're providing them, which is super critical, and then ultimately, depending on their age, right? Like I think what are their financial needs, along the way if they're starting out more on the emergency savings side, or debt around student debt and debt repayment, or all the way up to getting up and gearing up for retirement.
Okay. And I think that's a pretty common set of goals, and certainly um, a lot of conversations. And is that what you're seeing with your clients? Is that their conversations, and like, how are they using this? Their conversations every quarter? Is it in the quarterly meetings? They're kind of setting some kind of metrics to go by. I know obviously you have some kind of stoplight chart of plan health scores. So is like, how is this working in practice? Like, what are folks doing to say, okay, we're going to adopt this, and we're gonna try to attack some of this stuff?
Yeah, the approach for our partnership with plan sponsors is to, at least once a year, we're having a really deep conversation around the goals for the retirement plan. Um, how can Fidelity help in and along that? So at least once a year, and very often quarterly and monthly, we're meeting with the plan sponsors to understand their goals for the retirement planning. And again, um, using the tools that we have to understand where folks are in terms of how they're behaving with the plan and engaging with it, and developing those strategies to, if it's a plan design option, or if it's a sort of product or solution that we could enable, or all the way to how do we develop that engagement strategy to move the needle, and where do we want to be targeted. The way we track that from there is to understand all the retirement behaviors, but also this engagement and financial wellness. That's really the latest, because I think a lot of folks are doing quite well in the retirement plans, but they're struggling on things that are more short term in terms of financial needs that are more immediate. And our financial wellness assessment can help there. So we encourage the employees in the plans to participate in that financial wellness assessment, and that can, one, get us really good data on how the employees are doing for the ones that take it. And also it helps improve the experience for those employees on our digital platform. So it's a little double-edged sword there. And that's really the mechanism for understanding, how they're behaving in the plan, but also how they're feeling and doing in terms of those more near-term financial needs. And, I think tracking, right? So whether it's our plan health score, the benchmarking amongst other plans, or our financial wellness assessment, or really looking at that long-term preparedness in terms of our income replacement methodologies. Like we really need to use all the tools we have in place to understand how you're doing.
Yeah. And one of the things I hear a lot from our members, and I don't know um, if you know the number off the top of your head or know roughly, but it's hard to get the data, right? Like it is hard, especially when you're thinking wellness. There are so many components to public sector retirement. Some folks may have Social Security, may not.
Yep.
Like you said, there might be, 2, 3, 5, 10 DB tiers that your system has. You might be a hybrid plan that has an extra component. Putting all that data together, and that's just retirement, looking outside at what debt people have or savings outside the plan. Have you seen a lot of success in getting that data? Is it kind of like those engaged folks who are really benefiting the most, or how do you go about trying to scrape that up? Because I know that's something that a lot of our plan sponsors have struggled with.
Absolutely. I think it's really important to try to get that holistic view of the retirement plan. And so what we do here is we'll work with the plan sponsors, and we'll try to get that defined benefit plan data and merge it together with the defined contribution plan data to
Yeah, I think that's a
understand
big part.
how retirement is doing. Yeah, it's difficult. I know a lot of our employers don't have a lot of time to gather data and get it over to us to do the analysis, but at least once a year, we encourage that sort of activity to, one, see, for instance, right, like how are the folks nearing retirement doing? But as we've developed these additional tiers and maybe a hybrid approach with DBDC, have we designed it in a way that's sort of getting these mid and early career folks on the same pathway that folks nearing retirement are? And yeah, that's sort of that plan sponsor lens. And then for individuals, I think we encourage them to get to that planning behavior. Our tools on our platform are very good at getting that holistic picture developed for each participant and each employee. So you can impute your DB plan, you can update a prior employer DC balances, and really get that picture for you individually.
Yeah, and so that I think I've talked a lot with the DB folks at the association level, and saying that it's very helpful for our side to have that information. So encourage those folks to share data. It's not always easy. I know that a lot of times it's a different department, different part of the organization, and so there isn't always that crosstalk. But the more that there is, I think the more it helps. Now, some of this stuff can be kind of expensive, and when I talk to private sector associations or groups, a lot of them have very clear metrics, and they go, okay, for us, we're looking at productivity and sales and different kind of metrics to measure, are we getting an ROI on, any kind of wellness initiative or any benefit structure that we have. In the public sector, much harder to do, right? We don't have that same data on the other side that says, here is the benefit from what you got. Now, we could look at things like attrition or turnover and those kind of things. But how can a plan sponsor balance the cost of doing any of this stuff with outcomes before they're, like as they're redesigning and thinking about how to use kind of a broader metric set?
Yeah, I think it's even just attacking it from the form of, you need to have the conversation, with your benefits team, with your provider, to understand what you have in place and how it might be impacting these things you're trying to optimize for. So, I tell the story all the time. 6, 7 years ago, it was just really cost and retirement outcomes. That was really our two most important things. Now with its recruitment, retention, Cost is there, retirement outcomes. How can we operate the plan efficiently? So there's a lot of things we're trying to optimize for, but as you look through in particular your DC design, I think you need to evaluate things like eligibility, vesting, the cost, and how you've structured your entire your sort of employer contribution side of things.
Mhm.
Couple that with your DB. I think you really need to assess across these different optimization points to understand it. There are tools, I think we have our plan health score that can help plans, understand what they have and what might be a lever for improvement. But I think it's really critical to even have that conversation around how you feel like you're doing and what you have in place and what you feel like it's designed to be, and then where do we want to be, right? So like the
Yeah.
next step is to think like, are we where we want to be? And those types of things can be done competitively. So who do you compete with for talent? What do they have in place? And I think that kind of extended benchmarking is really critical to particularly those recruitment and retention side of things. And then, understanding where you want to be as an organization, that can help you determine sort of that how rich can you and should you have your retirement contribution be?
Yeah, that's great. Great thought. Well, we're running short on time. Really appreciate you coming, Nick. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share?
Yeah. Yeah, that I think it's just a great conversation. Thank you so much for having me. And I think this is a really challenging time for a lot of organizations. And I think work with your providers. I think we're here to help.
All right. Well, we'll leave it at that. Really appreciate you coming today, Nick. Nick Emerald from Fidelity. Thanks for being on the show. And we'll catch you next time on Connect Conversations.
Thank you.